Okay.
Okay, this little video is going to show you guys how to make a DNA model out of beads and wire. What you're going to need 6 different colors of beads. You're going to need a little bit more of 2 colors of them. These are going to represent your sugars and your phosphates. The other 4 colors are going to represent your nitrogen bases, the letters that go in the middle. You don't need quite as many of them. You'll also need 2 pieces of wire. Now my wire is going to be shorter than you actually need. You'll probably need to stretch your arms out and get a good arm length piece for each wire. You'll need 2 wires that long. You'll also need to have your DNA sequence that you made up already completed. So if you've got this worksheet done, you need to have this first column all the way done, at least. Now, this is awfully small, so for the purpose of the video, I've made mine a little bit bigger. Okay? So, here we go. Now, remember, starting this is going to be the hardest part. Once you get it started, it'll go along pretty smoothly. Don't get frustrated, just keep trying. If you don't understand, replay the video. You can watch it as many times as you want. To start, grab 1 piece of wire. Actually, before you do that, you need to decide which color of bead is going to represent what in your model. So, for my setup here, I'm going to use the blue is going to equal a phosphate. The orange is going to equal a deoxyribose sugar. My green, I'll make equal guanine, my G. Pink will be my cytosine, a C. Yellow will be my adenine, an A. And purple will equal my thymine, a T. You should probably write these down so you can remember them at any point when you're building your model. Once you've decided what color represents what, grab your wire. The first thing you need to do on this first wire is to secure a bead for a phosphate. My phosphates are blue, so I'm going to start with a blue. I'm going to leave a good bit of wire on the end so that way I can secure this to my poster board when I'm done. I'm going to take my wire and just double it back through my bead so that way I have a loop on the outside. This is going to hold my bead on nice and secure. Now, if I flip this over, I can put beads on the other end of the wire and they're not going to slide off. Okay. This wire is going to represent one side of my DNA model. So I'm going to put a phosphate, then a sugar, then my very first letter, which is an A. My A's are yellow, so I'm going to put a yellow bead on. I'm going to set this one aside just for a second. Grab your other wire. And remember, your DNA model is kind of turned upside down. One side is going to start with a phosphate. The other side is going to start with a sugar. So this side, I'm going to use a sugar first. And just like before, take the end of my wire, double it back through my bead, and pull it tight so the bead won't slip. Then I'm going to turn it upside down, and I'm going to put the other letter, a T, which is purple, onto that wire. I now have the start of both of my strands. I have to get these 2 strands to interconnect. Basically, I'm going to be building my molecule upside down, so it might be easiest to turn the paper around so it'll match what you're doing. If you're right-handed, put both wires with the beads and the short side of the wire in your left hand. Okay? Now, look how I've got them lined up. I've got them lined up so that the side with the A needs to be on the side with the A. The A is on the left of my paper, it's on the left in my hand. The side with the T is on the right on the paper and on the right in my hand. Make sure that at all times you keep the wires in the right spot so they'll match your paper. Okay? We're building this upside down basically, so I'm going to check off letter by letter as I go. In order to put these 2 wires together, keep them in your left hand, take the end of one wire And you're always going to go through top to bottom, just the letter and the sugar. You never go through a phosphate, just go through the two beads. So I've gone through from top to bottom, not the other way around, top to bottom, my letter and my sugar. I'm going to pull this is the hard part, most of the way closed, but not all the way. Now I'm going to take my other wire, not the wire I just had, the other wire, goes through just the letter bead and the sugar. There is no phosphate on that side, so it's going to go through all the way down here. Now that I've got both wires through, I'm going to pull both wires tight. I'm going to pick up my wires again so that the small wires are on the bottom and the long wires are hanging off down to the side. This should make your first step in your ladder. You should see that the blues are going to be the spaces between the ladder. The sugars are at the ends of the step, and your letters are in the middle. And again, double check to make sure that your A is on the left and your T is on the right. Now, if you continue to hold this in your hand, all you have to do is load the beads for the right side onto the wire on the right. Load the beads for the left side onto the wire on the left. Your order is going to be this. Every time you put on beads from now on, once you've got past this start point, you're going to put on a phosphate, a sugar, and the next letter. So for my right side wire, I'm going to put on a phosphate, a sugar, and my next letter is a T, which is a purple. I'm going to put those onto the wire. Try to keep this in your hand so it doesn't turn around. You might want to double the wire back over like that. Phosphate, then sugar, then a T. Get the beads all the way to the bottom. Hold them in your hand so they don't slide off. Now you're going to do the same thing on the other side. Phosphate, sugar, A. Phosphate, sugar, A. Get those wires, beads all the way to the bottom. Now, we've got a phosphate, sugar, and our letters for the middle. You're going to grab the wires and crisscross them through the beads again. Remember, you need to go from the top down through the letter and the sugar, but never the phosphate. Don't ever go through your phosphate bead, because it's got to be the space between. If your wire gets a funny looking loop like that where it's doubled over, that's going to end up being a kink in your bead. Just as you go along, straighten that out so it's going to make a nicer step. Pull it most of the way through. Take your other wire and go through your letter and your sugar, but never the phosphate. Now, pull both wires tight, and you're ready to start again with the next step. From this point on, everything is just repeating until you get to the end of your molecule. Phosphate, sugar, letter. My next letter is a C on the right side. So I'm going to put a phosphate, a sugar, and my C, if you can read this upside down, is a pink. So I'm going to put a pink on here as well. Slide them to the end, hold on to them. Do the same thing on the other side. But this time I need a G. So I'm going to go phosphate, sugar, G for green. Slide them to the end. It might help to mark off your letters as you go along. That way you know which ones you've done. And again, take your wires through the two beads top to bottom on both sides. Pull it tight. Again, once you do this, what you should see, the sugars and the letters make the steps or the rungs of my DNA ladder. The phosphates make the spaces between. You're using wire, so you can actually bend this around to make the shape be very nice and good and pretty. Once you've gotten through all of your steps, all of your rungs of the ladder, you're going to need to finish your molecule. For the sake of time, I'm going to go ahead and cut mine short and show you how to do that now. Remember we said our DNA was actually turned half of it being upside down so that it starts with a phosphate on one side and a sugar on the other. Because that's the way that it starts, we need to end it the opposite way. The side that started with a phosphate needs to end with a sugar. This side does that. The side that starts with sugar needs to end with a phosphate. So I need to add one last phosphate bead on the side that didn't have one at the beginning. So now my model is going to be asymmetrical on the two ends. I'm going to take my wire and just like the beginning, I'm going to double back through my bead through the very last bead on each side and pull it tight. I'm going to do the same thing over here through my last sugar bead. Now I have a finished DNA model. I'll lay it down on the table, straighten it out a little bit so that my phosphates and sugars are in the right spot and my steps are all nice and straight. Get it as good looking as you can. Then pick it up and give it a twist to give it that DNA spirally double helix look. You can cut off the extra ends of the wire now, but leave yourself a little bit of room, because in order to secure this to your cardboard, you can poke a hole through your cardboard and stick the wires through. Then on the back side, you can twist them together and tape them down, and that's going to hold your DNA to your cardboard. And that's all there is to it. At the end of that, you should have a completed DNA model.